Hey you guys, it's me, Demi, and I'm so excited to be talking to one of my favorite people on the planet. They are such a lighthouse, and this is ALOK. Everyone say hi to ALOK.
Hi.
I'm so excited that we get to be talking about everything gender and sexual diversity
I'm
today.
so excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah. So I wanted to just ask a couple questions, if you don't mind, and I figure we could both answer them. The first question is, we've had tons of discussions about this, but for people who aren't as familiar, what is the gender binary and why is it holding us back?
The best way to describe it is if we were to tell people that suddenly there's no more colors, there's just two colors, people will be like, what are you talking about? And that's what we do with gender. We take something that is so special and diverse and we collapse it into just one of two categories and divide billions of spiritual, complex people into one of two boxes. That's not a biological fact, that's a social choice. So the reason the gender binary is holding us back is it actually prevents us from expressing ourselves creatively and being who we want to be, not who we're told that we should be.
I know that ever since I met you, I felt more comfortable in my own skin, and also by shedding some of those gender norms that had been placed on me as a teenager or my whole life, actually. And I'm really excited to share that experience with other people, showing that we are so much more than two categories. And it's not even, it's so much more socially constructed than it even is medical. So, but I also wanted to ask, what does moving beyond the gender binary actually mean?
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that we're trying to make everyone non binary and that we're somehow shaming people for being men or women. But I want to make really clear there's no shame here. We're not interested in shame. Actually, what moving beyond the gender binary means is that you get to decide what your gender is. Other people don't get to tell you who you are. And you get to decide what man and woman or being non binary means to you. So it's actually about recognizing that there's as many ways to be women as there are women. There's as many ways to be men as there are men. And there's as many ways to be non binary as there are non binary. And I think, as your friend, watching you continually redefine yourself is what it means to move beyond the gender binary, is to actually recognize that we're constantly changing and that fluidity is something that's beautiful. The reason the gender binary holds us back is it prioritizes tradition from like hundreds of years ago rather than actually focusing on who we are right now.
Yeah, and I also feel like it limits our evolution as a species, humans. I feel like when you put those boundaries on us, it limits us from evolving into being so much more than just these two categories, like you were saying. And it's beautiful. Ever since I've started to really do a lot of work on myself, I've learned to embrace the parts of me that are masculine and embrace the parts of me that are feminine. And playing with that has been really, really fun. And I feel like everyone can do that, whether they identify as, non-binary or not.
Yeah, I think everyone can play with gender. And, what I find really interesting and compelling about both of our stories is that we've both been negatively impacted by gender norms in our own way. I wanted to ask you, how have gender norms hurt you in your life?
Gender norms hurt me in my life because it's really difficult to grow up as a woman in the entertainment industry, because at certain points in my life, I thought I had to be something other than I was. I played up the sexual side of myself when I turned a certain age, and when I started embracing my sexuality a little bit more, I thought that I had to display it for everybody in order to, I don't know, to really feel more like an adult woman. And what I didn't realize is that that's actually not who I was and didn't want to be at the time. But I took on that role as it was my identity. And that's what we do with gender norms, is we take on these roles of, well, I'm supposed to be a strong woman, so I'm going to shut my emotions off. I'm not going to listen to my intuition when I'm hungry or this or that. And I did that my whole life. And over the past year, getting to know what parts of me that are feminine and the parts of me that are masculine, what works for me and what doesn't, has really been so beneficial to my spiritual evolution. And I think that's what it's all about, is like, as I've been going on this spiritual evolution, just identifying more parts of me that, like what are the parts of me that work, and what do I want to take into the person I want to become.
I think that's so beautiful. Ultimately, it's about choice, right? Like gender norms value us for who we're supposed to be rather than who we choose to be. And I think so often people get scared of us as non-binary and trans and gender non-conforming people because we're actually saying a very beautiful and merciful thing, which is, we believe in your right to have a choice. And then people are like, wait, I get to have a choice? Like, I didn't know I get to have a choice. And I think people are afraid of freedom because so much of the way that mental health works in this country is we're taught that you should live someone else's fantasy of who you should be and not live your own life. And if you live your own life, that's somehow a threat to other people. So I think that both of us have done such powerful work to reclaim our souls, reclaim our mental health from other people's idea of who we should be. Maybe if we could speak a little bit about the power of creative self-expression. I'd love to hear from you, like, how being able to do that work of determining who you are has benefited your life.
Creative expression for me, it's been my outlet. You know, the way that I dress, the way that I write my music, the way that I perform everything, the way that I style my house. Like, creative expression for me is freedom to be who I am. And in turn, that actually helps other people accept themselves more and become who they are. Because if they can see us with creative freedom, living our lives and living our truths, it makes other people want to do the same. And that's why you came over to my house on Valentine's, and it was so amazing. You dressed up to the nines, and you made a really incredible point. You said, I don't just dress up for myself, I dress up for other people as well. And when you went on to elaborate, it was because you want other people to see your joy and your light and be attracted to that and be inspired to live their truth. And I just want you to know, like, that's so beautiful, and it's inspired me to live my truth more as well. And that's the effect that creative expression can have on someone, especially when they feel so isolated. Growing up in the South, I had some gender norms placed on me and sexuality norms placed on me that I really didn't identify with, so I felt alone. But music was always the one thing that helped me. And over time, it's just helped me even more learn who I am. And I'm excited to be the person I am today.
Similarly, art has helped me understand that healing is possible. I thought that loneliness was the only way to exist, but art actually helped me connect with the people like you in my life, who I was waiting to meet all along. Other people who valued me for who I was, not some fantasy of what I should be. And other people who found me beautiful because I was different, not because I conformed. I think what's so scary about gender norms is that at a fundamental level, we feel like we're only lovable if we perform what other people want us to be. And we fear that if we're actually ourselves, that no one will love us. And that fear has such an extreme impact on our mental health. I know both you and I have been so vocal about speaking about our struggles with mental health, but a big part of that for me has been around gender, that people have all these expectations of what I should be doing, of how I should be acting, of what I should be wearing, that I never consented to. And so actually now that I get to choose every day who I am, my mental health has never been better.
I talked a little bit on Ellen about why I cut my hair. And for me, you know, one of the reasons was I used to hide behind my hair, but and I talked about how I used to hide behind it for body image issues, but the main reason is I used to hide behind it like I was holding on to my femininity like it was the last thing that I needed to shed before I fully accept myself. And once I stripped that, you know, I was really scared of the world being like, why'd she cut her hair? You know, it's not cute. A lot of my fans also, they push this on me. We want your long hair. We want this. And it's like, I can't always be who other people want me to be. I have to start living for myself. And so this year I did. And I've never been happier, like you said.
That makes me so happy. And I think it's a really spiritual thing what we're doing, because what we're saying is like through surrender, like we actually get peace. Like no longer fighting other people's ideas or projections of who we should be, but just surrendering to like our beauty and our truth and our authenticity. It's so funny because people often ask me, you know, like, well, are you fighting for more power for trans and gender nonconforming people? And I'm like, yeah, but I think what I'm actually fighting for us is to no longer need power, is to actually be vulnerable with one another. And vulnerability requires, in some ways, giving up power and actually being there for each other and like needing each other. I feel like people are so afraid of experimenting with their gender because they're afraid of vulnerability. And that's why I think every time I speak about gender, I speak about mental health, because they're one and the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to ask you too. I know that we touched a lot about this, but how have gender norms negatively impacted your life? And like, what helped you get out of that? You know, you said they go hand in hand. When your mental health was struggling, how did you come out of that?
You know, gender norms have impacted my physical safety first and foremost, because every day I go outside, I have to make the choice between authenticity and safety. And that's the reality for many trans and gender nonconforming people of color like me, is that because society has such rigid ideas of what they think that a quote man should act like, or like what a woman should look like, they'll literally punish us into submission. So harassment becomes a way of reinforcing these arbitrary stereotypes and disincentivizing freedom. So they say, oh, if you actually prioritize yourself, we're going to punish you to put you back in your place. And so for a long time, I didn't express myself, not because I didn't want to, but because I was afraid of my physical, emotional safety. But then I started to realize something over the past few years, which is my mental health is also about my physical safety. People always want to make mental and physical health separate. So people would say to me, well, if you just tone it down, then you won't experience violence. But if I'm toning it down, I'm doing violence to myself. And if I want to be living, not just existing, I actually have to live my truth, because that physically hurts my body. Mental health has a negative impact on our body. And so I think what I've really had to realize is that expressing myself is an act of love for myself. Every outfit that I put together is an act of love for myself and the world. That the reason that I am fighting so hard against gender norms is because of compassion, is because I want people to be able to self-author themselves and be safe, and not just safe, but celebrated. And I think that's what our gift is as artists to the world, is we teach people, you deserve to be loved for who you are, and we will celebrate you for what makes you uniquely you.
I do want to talk a little bit about expectations. You know, 2021 is already off to a very difficult start, especially for the trans community with anti-trans legislation being introduced all over the country. Can you catch us up to speed with what's going on?
Sure thing. So, a lot of people don't understand the state of emergency that is facing trans and non-binary people right now. 2020 was officially the most deadly year on record for the trans community, with heightened murders of especially Black trans women. And in 2021, we've already seen 7 reported murders of trans and gender nonconforming people, and it's not even halfway through the year. This is an unacceptable travesty, and this kind of hate violence is actually being enabled and espoused by mainstream political establishments and media in this country. In fact, in 2021, there are over 20 states that are now debating over 30 pieces of anti-trans legislation. If this kind of coordinated attack on the civil rights or the human rights of another community was happening, people would call this an emergency. But because it's happening to trans people, people aren't speaking about it. In fact, mainstream media isn't even talking about it. So what these pieces of legislation look like are, in Iowa, they're trying to ban teachers from talking about trans people or gender identity. And we know from history in places like the UK with Section 28, where they made it illegal to speak about homosexuality, this has such a horrible negative impact on the mental health of LGBTQ people. In places like Indiana, they're trying to make it so you can only use a restroom consistent with your chromosomes. Like, how are they supposed to know your chromosomes? And why is that relevant to what restroom you're using? In other states, they're trying to criminalize doctors for giving life-affirming healthcare to trans and gender nonconforming young people. In other states, they're trying to ban trans athletes from competing in sports. And then finally, they're also trying to forcibly out trans young people to their families, which could lead to the ongoing crisis of trans and gender nonconforming homelessness. Ultimately, what we can learn from all of this legislation is that the explicit agenda here is twofold. First, it's to erase LGBTQ and especially trans and gender nonconforming people. The agenda is to make it impossible to be trans and to live a trans life. Then secondly, they're trying to distract people from the real issues that are happening in this country. It's not a coincidence that now we've passed over 500,000 deaths from the coronavirus pandemic, and legislators are more concerned with policing trans and gender nonconforming youth than responding to the real travesty and pandemic. So what they're doing is trying to distract people from the most important issues of our times, like climate change, like racial justice, like the healthcare crisis in this country with people lacking access to adequate healthcare. And so the way that you do that is you say, look at these people over here, look at what they're wearing. These are non-issues. And it's really important that people understand that's why we need to all show up for trans and non-binary people, because we're being used as a diversionary tactic, as a scare tactic to prevent people from actually working together to create a better country for everyone.
Yeah, I'm just going to put that on repeat for on my Instagram just for hours. Everyone needs to hear that. That right there is so true. You're just speaking just straight truth right there.
I had a question for you around this. You know, I often feel like the way that people can get away with doing this is that people don't feel like they're worth being cared for. So they'll be like, oh, I'm okay, with the government not giving me economic relief during the pandemic. I'm okay with not having healthcare because they're okay with treating themselves badly. And when you begin to advocate for yourself, you begin to notice other people are treating me badly. How are you, I know it's a work in progress, how are you claiming space in the world and saying, I'm worth being treated with respect? Because I think if anything, what we're trying to teach the world as trans and gender nonconforming people is you're worthy of respect. And it feels like so many people who are not trans or so many people who are not challenging gender norms don't feel like they're worthy of respect.
You know, it's definitely a work in progress, and it's something that I've had to really work on for years, is learning my worth, learning my values, what's important to me. When I started taking care of myself and really advocating for myself, there was a sense of urgency to start advocating for other people. And that's been the most rewarding part about this self-exploration journey, is that, yes, I really started to help myself, but it's actually helped so many more, because now that I have taken on more of an activist role, especially on my Instagram, you know, posting more and more information for people to learn about what's going on in the world today, posting more and more, it's helping them take a look at themselves. And then how, you know, I've had tons of friends say, how can I help? How can I be spreading information like you? And I'm like, just repost whatever I'm posting, you know, or keep searching. And it's been, that's been the most beautiful part. And I think that we all have to go within to really be able to help others. But once we can do that, coming together, that community is, it's so rewarding to know that you're not alone. And that's why I appreciate our friendship so much, because you've been there for me, and I just feel like, or we've been there for each other, and I just feel like, you know, I couldn't have gotten there had I not worked on myself first.
What I'm hearing and what you're saying is such a powerful truth, which is that by practicing self-compassion, we have compassion for the world. And that is a non-binary lesson, which is we're not just trying to challenge the binary of man, woman, male, female, but also me and you. And we're trying to say, if we really love each other, we recognize that we love the world because we love ourselves. We love ourselves because we love the world. And that's what I'm really asking people to recognize, is that there's no dignity in living in a world where trans and gender nonconforming people are treated with so much malice and disregard. What kind of spiritual crisis are we in where people can come after some of the most vulnerable people in the world, knowing that that's going to lead to the ongoing crisis of suicide, of houselessness, of discrimination? I don't want to be a part of that world. So for anyone who's listening who maybe doesn't identify as trans, understand this is also your fight, because we're trying to create a more compassionate and just world where all people matter more than their bodies. And I think that's a lesson in both your and my work, Demi, which is you are so much more than a body.
Mm-hmm.
And when
Yes!
I read these legislations trying to define people by their genitals or by their chromosomes, I'm like, no, we have souls. And we need to be respected for our souls, not just our bodies.
So that's exactly how I see it, is I feel like, you know, even growing up Christian, I was taught my body is a temple. And so I see my body as just a temporary shell for my soul while I'm here. And that's the same with everyone. We have to look past our shells to connect to each other. Well, thank you so much, ALOK. I love you endlessly. I am so grateful for our friendship, and I can't wait to see you again. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Spread this conversation with everyone you know, so that you can help be an ally. And and I love you guys. Thank you.